Welcome, brave souls, to Fear File Chronicles, your one-way ticket to spine-chilling stories and terrifying tales. Tonight, we'll be diving into the darkest corners of the human mind with the story. My family experienced a deadly car crash, pinned by the twisted mind of Icy Dice. Together, we'll explore the unexplained and face our deepest fears. But before we begin, if you enjoy trembling in terror, be sure to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow fear fanatics, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the bell notification so you never miss an eerie episode. Your support truly means the world to us. So feel free to leave a comment below to join the Fear File Chronicles community. Now, without further ado, let's unravel the mysteries of the unknown together. As we delve into tonight's fear-inducing story, my family experienced a deadly car crash. Dim the lights and prepare yourself for a chilling journey into the Fear File Chronicles. It was 8:40 on a Saturday evening. The adage goes that there are moments in our lives we'll remember for an eternity. These events are etched into our minds, whether we prefer them to be or not. We claim to remember these moments down to the smallest detail. My experience can affirm this theory. Crystal clear water droplets tumbled from the sky, dotting the windshield. The vehicles driving alongside mine had headlights piercing the rainfall. The night sky above was a tapestry of thousands of twinkling stars. As I drew in the crisp air through the slightly opened window, my chest rose. Turning my head, I found my eyes drawn to hers and the beauty of her radiant smile. Catching sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror, I observed my sleeping son, secured tightly in his seat. Suddenly, high beams flooded my vision, causing my eyes to widen. Reacting instantaneously, I jammed my foot onto the brake, teeth clenched, jaw locked. The horrifying sound of crunching metal invaded my ears as my car surged forward. The shattering of glass marked our abrupt halt, flinging my body forward and my face into the steering wheel. Two screams, one beside me and one behind, pierced the silence. As swiftly as they had started, they faded away, leaving behind a deafening quiet. Unable to move, my vision began to blur. Yet my lips moved almost on their own accord. "No," I managed to mutter before darkness swallowed me. My recollections from this point are hazy. I recall the noise of rushing people and being transported down a white corridor. Above, bright lights called to me, but my efforts to reach them were futile, my arms unresponsive. Soon, I succumbed to the exhaustion pulling me under, and my eyelids fluttered shut. For weeks, I resided in the hospital, mending from multiple fractures and enduring numerous surgeries. Physical pain paled compared to my anxieties about my family. My heart lightened when I heard that my son had survived. But the dread returned full force when I was told that my wife's condition was critical. The nights seemed endless. I spent hours watching the ticking hands of the clock on the wall. Unshed tears threatened to spill at odd hours, soaking my face until my cheeks turned raw. Anxiety caused sweat to dampen the bedsheets clenched in my hands. Every time a staff member or a doctor entered, my gaze shot towards them. Their expressions mirrored my despair. Whenever I inquired about my wife, their responses were consistent.
"I assure you, Mr. Johnson, we're doing our best to treat your wife."
Day after day, I was met with variations of this response. Yet I continued to hope for a positive update. Then, one day, a staff member walked into my room. As I struggled to stand and greet him, I noticed his somber expression. His words fell slowly, one after the other. As he spoke, my knees began to tremble, growing shakier with each word. Eventually, I collapsed onto the floor, chest heaving, breaths growing erratic. Several people rushed to steady me and help me back onto my bed. Their words of comfort were lost in the commotion. My surroundings blurred, reducing the figures around me to unrecognizable forms. I stared ahead blankly, my senses overwhelmed by the stench of my own sweat. Exhausted, I finally succumbed to the hands, trying to keep me calm. After this episode, the nurses cleaned me up. Donned in fresh clothes and given time to process the news, I was then escorted to the lobby. There he was, my son. As swiftly as my weak legs would allow, I approached him. I bent down and pulled him into an embrace, gently patting his back. He buried his face into my chest, dampening my shirt. He knew. Before departing from the hospital, I was given several recommendations for local psychiatrists and therapists. After expressing gratitude to the hospital staff for their support, my son and I caught the bus back to our neighborhood. That night, we had a dinner of baked chicken and rice. However, my son just poked at his meal listlessly with his fork. I sighed and finished my plate, hoping it would encourage him to do the same. Instead, he pushed his dish away, right in front of the empty chair that was stationed at the table. Knowing he was resistant, I was still thankful the hospital had been taking care of his nutritional needs. I suggested he go to bed and rest, to which he complied, getting up from his seat and heading to his room. After he settled into bed, I tucked him in and proposed that I stay in his room for the night. He gently declined my offer by shaking his head. I stooped down to plant a kiss on his forehead, wishing him a peaceful night's rest. Then I opened my laptop to investigate the therapy centers mentioned in the pamphlet I had received earlier. However, I cringed at the exorbitant costs associated with each center. Our combined income, mine and my wife's, along with the financial impact of my hospital stay, made immediate therapy an unattainable option. I closed my laptop with a sigh, walking towards my bedroom. As I approached the wooden door, I traced my fingers around its frame until they reached the cold brass knob. I counted down from 5, compelling myself to open the door at 0. Upon entering the room, I flicked the light switch on, illuminating the gray, dull walls. With a newfound courage, I began to move one foot in front of the other. I approached the oak frame of my queen-sized bed and gazed down at the sheets. The bed seemed so different. It felt overwhelmingly empty. Near the bed, atop a dresser, was a picture frame. It showcased a man and his soulmate, their faces illuminated with joy. As I began to weep, tears trickling down my cheeks, I looked back towards the bed. I realized that my tears were dampening the sheets. Inhaling deeply, I hastily exited the room. I sought refuge on the living room couch, where after hours of restlessness, I finally fell asleep. In my dream, I was surrounded by blinding light. Unable to recognize my surroundings, I reached out, hoping to find something familiar. My fingers made contact with something, a wheel. Suddenly, the roar of an engine echoed from somewhere within the light. Tires screeched, followed by an explosion of terrified voices. Metal clashed against metal, and panicked screams filled the space. The chaos abruptly ceased, replaced by chilling silence. The cold night air infiltrated the car through the shattered window, making the hairs on my arms stand up. Even though I knew it was a dream, the realism was unnerving. My subconscious mind had perfectly replicated the feeling of the leather-coated steering wheel under my grip. Anxiety washed over me as I sensed a round object slumped against my shoulder. I could feel the dampness of warm liquid droplets as they fell onto my hand. Before I could process this, my attention was drawn to a sudden weight against my left shoulder. Turning my head, I saw an arm reaching in through the shattered window. I tilted my head upward and was met with the sight of a man standing outside. Dressed in black jeans and a gray suit, he was slim, almost fragile. His clothes hung loosely on his bony frame. His skin appeared stretched thin, as if it barely contained the bone underneath. Despite the surreal situation, I felt a strange sense of relief. The man had a familiar aura about him. This comforting encounter was fleeting, however, as I woke up before I could see his face. Upon waking, I touched my shoulder, expecting to feel an imprint, but found nothing. My encounter with the man was a mystery, especially since I felt such a strong connection with him. Yet I couldn't recall ever meeting him before. Even though I was still trying to make sense of the dream, I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to it than I initially thought. After all, dreams are often considered a gateway into the subconscious. I will keep you posted on any further developments. Thank you for bearing with me up to this point. An update. The funeral service for my wife had just ended a few hours ago. As I sat reflecting, I felt a gentle tug on my base shirt. It was my son. He clung to my shirt, pulling himself closer. I responded by gently massaging his scalp and holding him near. Our family was never the social type, but a few friends and relatives did stop by to offer their condolences. It was a kind gesture, but it didn't bring any solace. Truth be told, I found it difficult to socialize at my wife's funeral. The only reason I attended was out of necessity and a futile search for closure. In the end, it was just my son and I, standing alone before her casket. I approached the wooden box, placing a hand on it. The casket was elevated on a platform, surrounded by roses and candles placed on a nearby table. Despite the thoughtful arrangements, something felt incomplete. We had decided to cremate her as her body was too damaged for an open casket funeral. I turned to leave, but a peculiar sound caught my attention. Thump. I spun around, my gaze landing on the casket. Had I been hearing things? No, the only ones in the room were my son and me. I shifted to leave the room, yet my son had vanished. Where could he have gone? He hadn't left the room. I would have heard footsteps. Before I could call his name, I heard it once more. Thump. I was certain now. I had not been imagining things. Sean, where are you, buddy? I called out, feeling a surge of anxiety rise within me. I received no response except for a faint laughter emanating from behind me, near the casket. That laugh was familiar. I caught my breath, spinning around to confront the source of the sound. There she stood, her ethereal presence illuminating the room. What in the... I uttered, frozen in disbelief. This was impossible. I must be hallucinating, I murmured. Had I lost my sanity? I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I hadn't noticed my gradual movement towards her. I reached out my arms, letting them rest on her shoulders. Her face was decorated with barely noticeable red freckles. She smiled, her pearly whites gleaming, and her dimples appeared. It was indeed her. She stood before me, palpably real. I wanted to speak, but I choked on my own words. Her cool, smooth ring grazed my cheek as she gently touched me. Lowering my arms to her waist, I pulled her close. Her eyes were all that mattered when I looked into them. The world ceased to exist. It was just her and me in that place. In that moment, we swayed gently, like autumn leaves rustling in a brisk wind. As we danced, I was absorbed by her warmth. My muscles relaxed, and soon I was unconscious of our movements. My body moved rhythmically to the beat of our conjoined hearts. I was in heaven, as if my love had come back to life. With a contented smile, I closed my eyes. Drip. A wet splash sounded, and I felt a liquid pool onto my hand. The warmth contrasted sharply with the suddenly cold surface pressed against me. My eyes shot open. The once vibrant eyes of Elizabeth were now lifeless and dull. Her skin clung tightly to her bones, her once beautiful form now resembling a ghoul. I looked down at my hands to find them smeared with blood. A large wound stretched across her abdomen, and the sickening smell of burned flesh filled my nostrils. I pushed her away and crumpled to the floor. I had only an instant to process the situation before vomiting violently. I regretted meeting her gaze again. Her once sweet smile was now a grotesque grin. She dragged herself towards me, leaving a trail of blood and pus. I tried to scramble away, but nausea overwhelmed me. I winced as she latched onto my arm, her rotten nails digging into my skin. With a burst of energy, she lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. I screamed and fought, trying desperately to dislodge her. Despite her decaying form, she overpowered me, scratching and clawing at my flesh. Then, a small hand tugged at my base shirt. I rose from the floor, looking down at my son, His fearful, concerned eyes met mine. Beside me was a puddle of vomit and tears. Had I imagined everything? I realized that wasn't the most crucial question. Had my son seen what just transpired? I felt ashamed, having displayed such weakness in front of him. He was supposed to see me as a superhero, a resilient figure. That image had crumbled, first in the hospital, now here. How would he view me now? I was consumed with regret and dismay, but that feeling was interrupted when Sean hugged me. His tiny arms exerted as much strength as they could muster. I froze, then returned his embrace. He had seen me at my lowest, seen me break down. Yet, as I looked at my son comforting me in my direst need, I didn't see disappointment. All I saw was an act of compassion. Struggling to maintain my composure, I let go of Sean and stood upright. Sean was only a child who had already suffered a tremendous loss, the loss of his mother. At such a young age, I doubted he fully grasped the concept of death. Despite this, I was certain he missed Elizabeth dearly, and it was my duty to support him. I vowed then and there that I would be his pillar of strength. That evening, we arrived home. I made the best pot roast I could for Sean, and was overjoyed to see him eat heartily again. Tucking him into bed was the next order of business. I pulled the sheets and covers over him, ensuring he was comfortable and warm. His bedside lamp bathed the room in a soft, reassuring light. "You doing okay, little guy?" I asked, hoping for a response. To my disappointment, Sean remained silent, as he had been since the incident. I didn't understand his silence, but chose not to press him about it. My focus was on getting him the help he needed as soon as possible. From a nearby shelf, I retrieved Sean's stuffed teddy bear and waved it in front of him. "You remember how we got this?" I asked, trying to stir his memory. "We went to the fair last year, remember? You won Teddy in a baseball game." I had hoped recalling this fond memory might evoke a reaction from him, but he simply gave a small smile and continued looking at me. Despite my disappointment, I returned his smile and gently patted his head. "When Mommy and I got married, we knew we wanted a baby," I began, sharing a memory from our past. "We prayed every night for a baby boy, and then you came into our lives. We were overjoyed, and from that point onward, you brought us the greatest happiness. But your mom, she won't be around for a long time. I promise, though, she's watching over you from heaven. She's smiling, Sean. She's incredibly proud of her beautiful baby boy. Just as she is, so am I. We will always love you, Sean." Sean remained silent throughout. Yet I could see in his eyes that he understood. He had to have understood. He just had to. All I longed for was to hear his voice again. "Good night, Sean," I whispered, rising to leave his room. Just as I was about to leave, he reached out and clutched my arm. "Oh, right. Sorry, buddy," I said, bending down to kiss his forehead. Satisfied, he nodded his head and settled back down. After turning off his lamp, I quietly closed his bedroom door. Walking into the bathroom, I gazed into the mirror. I had managed to keep my promise, to stay strong for Sean, at least for tonight. Gripping the sink tightly, I leaned over and studied my reflection. A question lingered. What had happened earlier? Could it be related to the dream I had the other night? Why was I plagued by these unnerving visions? This was uncharted territory for me, as I had never dealt with such mental distress in the past. I didn't know how to process this unsettling experience. If people knew about the things I was experiencing, would they think I was losing my mind? For the first time in my life, I felt small, powerless, and out of control. Frustrated, I clenched my hand into a fist and slammed it into the wall. Sleep eluded me that night. All I could do was stare blankly at the ceiling. My mind was a whirl of thoughts, none of them making any sense. I dismissed these disturbing experiences as nightmares, promising to keep everyone updated on any future developments. This platform serves as my outlet, a place to share my thoughts. I don't want to burden my son with these issues, so I'm putting my thoughts into words here. Thank you all for your attention. It means a lot. Another update. Lately, I've found eating to be a struggle. Besides the pot roast I had with Sean, I've had little appetite. My rapidly thinning frame attests to my significant weight loss. Sleep hasn't been kind to me either. Nevertheless, I've been exerting all my energy to stay strong. I firmly believe that Sean and I will overcome this together. After putting Sean to bed one evening, I decided to try driving again, the first time in a long while. I had been relying on walking or public transportation, but I knew I couldn't avoid driving indefinitely. We had taken Liz's car that fateful night, so my car was still available. Heading out to the driveway, I got into my vehicle. I inserted the keys into the ignition and slowly turned it, the familiar hum of the engine greeting my ears. Taking a deep breath, I shifted the gear into reverse and backed out of the driveway. Choosing to start slow, I drove through my neighborhood at a leisurely pace. As the car moved rhythmically down the road, I started to relax. Gathering some courage, I decided to venture onto a public road to practice driving amidst other vehicles. My hands began shaking, prompting me to grip the steering wheel tighter. I turned on my hazard lights to indicate I was still getting used to the road. Taking a few deep breaths, I gradually increased the pressure on the accelerator. As the car picked up speed, I managed to slow my breathing, allowing my body to relax. I pressed harder on the accelerator, driving even faster. Rolling down the windows, I let the wind blow against my face. The city's cacophony, honking horns, chattering pedestrians, restaurant music, filled my ears. I remembered the feeling of driving down the road at night in my car, the sensation of the breeze through my hair, the tactile feel of the road beneath my tires, felt reassuringly familiar. Glancing at the rearview mirror, I was surprised to find myself smiling. It wasn't just a smirk. It was a full-on grin. Easing my grip on the steering wheel, I let myself enjoy the drive. I drove for miles without a care in the world, reveling in the freedom of the open road. As darkness fell, I turned on my headlights. Looking up at the night sky, I saw millions of stars glittering above. Pausing to appreciate this peaceful sight, my attention was suddenly drawn to the oncoming headlights of another vehicle. Instinctively, I clutched the steering wheel. The bright lights flooded my vision as the memories flooded back. Remembering my vow to stay calm, I took several deep breaths, filling my lungs with oxygen and slowly exhaling through my nose. For a moment, the light engulfed my car. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it passed. Checking the rearview mirror, I saw the other car receding in the distance. Pulling over onto the shoulder, I put the car into park and leaned back into my seat. A sigh of relief escaped my lips, followed by a single sentence. I did it. Returning home late that night, I entered my house and moved to check on Sean. I crept into his room, only to find his bed empty, the covers thrown aside. Confused, I called out his name, but there was no response. Given that the door was locked when I arrived, I concluded that he must still be somewhere inside. I inspected the kitchen and dining room before proceeding to the hallway. The corridor was bathed in a darkness as thick as tar, save for a glow emanating from the end. There stood the door to my room, the faint light tracing its edges. Tentatively, I approached and entered the room. My son was seated on my bed, clutching a picture frame. The image inside portrayed Elizabeth standing beside Sean, and he stared at it with a stony expression. Joining him, I sat down and gently draped my arm over his shoulder. Upon closer inspection, I noticed dark stains on the picture frame. Lifting Sean's face towards me, I saw the evidence of his tears in the red circles surrounding his eyes. I used my thumb to wipe away the lingering wetness from his cheeks, but his melancholy persisted. In that moment, I was at a loss for words. I fixated on the picture in the frame, touching his hand as we sat in the solemn silence. After a while, I broke the silence, realizing the lateness of the hour. "Hey, buddy, let's head to bed, okay?" I suggested. Sean simply nodded and wearily made his way back to his room. As was routine, I tucked him in before retiring to my own room. Picking up the picture frame, I admired the photo of Elizabeth. Her beauty remained undiminished, And for the first time in a long while, seeing her image didn't bring me pain, but acceptance. I remembered my words to Sean about Elizabeth watching over him amongst the angels. Originally intended to comfort him, I found myself believing in it too, that somewhere out there, Elizabeth was watching over us. I looked at the picture of Sean standing by his mother, his smile pure and heartwarming, a contrast to his current state, stripped of his joy and youthful energy. A horrifying vision then replaced the familiar image. Sean appeared bruised, his limbs contorted unnaturally, his countenance stricken with terror. Shocked, I dropped the photo and rushed back to Sean's room. Bursting through the door, I found him peacefully asleep. Despite the disturbing vision, Sean was unharmed, alive, and breathing. Returning to my room, I picked up the dropped photo. I stared at it, relieved to find the image restored to its original state, depicting a cheerful Sean. Shaking off the unsettling vision, I prepared for bed. After some time, sleep finally claimed me, taking me into its deep embrace. The next morning, I woke early and headed to the kitchen. The sound of footsteps stirred my curiosity, and I traced them to Sean's room, the door slightly ajar. Inside, I found Sean, sitting with the entity from my dreams. The being was as emaciated as ever, his features obscured. The creature extended a skeletal hand toward Sean, brushing his hair gently. It took no notice of me, but despite this eerie scene, I felt no fear for myself or for Sean. I advanced towards the entity, reaching out to touch it. Just as I was about to make contact, I jolted awake, realizing it had all been a dream. In the wake of the disconcerting dream and my prior hallucination, I decided to put away the photo for a while. I felt a mix of relief and trepidation as I stashed the frame in the closet. I am incredibly grateful for the support you all have given me. I will keep you updated as the situation evolves. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. A final update. Sean, I need you to speak to me. Variations of that phrase had escaped my lips for at least half an hour. Please, buddy. You can talk to me, okay? I promise you can talk to Papa. Despite the repetition of these words, he remained silent. I was desperate for confirmation of his ability to speak. I needed to know that he was real. The onslaught of delusions had severely impacted my sanity. It was becoming harder to discern reality from the figments of my imagination. The need to confirm Sean's existence was paramount. I wanted to believe he was real, and his voice would be the evidence I needed. Couldn't he see the anguish in my eyes? Why wouldn't he utter a single word? I gripped his shoulders tightly, pleading for even a small response. Yet, he didn't oblige. Neither bribery nor pleading could extract a response. His actions were limited to grabbing my arm and leading me towards his room. Following him, an intense sense of dread brewed within me. My heart pounded in my throat as we entered his room together. The entity sat there. My head dropped low as Sean released my grasp, moving towards the creature. As I neared it, readying myself to touch it, I braced for awakening from another nightmare. I extended my hand to the figure, anticipating a sudden return to reality. But I didn't wake up. Instead, it placed its hand on me, and we felt each other's fragile frames. Gradually, I discerned the details of the being's face. It looked familiar. It bore my features. Reeling back, I watched the creature gently kiss Sean's forehead. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I stared at it. The creature and I locked eyes. A strange familiarity washed over me, confounding my already muddled thoughts. I found myself recalling the accident that fateful night. Flashing lights, shrill cries, and then the harsh realization that there was more. A soft red hue from the overhead traffic light illuminating the night sky. The sudden impact following the passing of my vehicle under the light. The vague memory of the doctors telling me that Sean had survived. Was it real? They say that there are some moments in our life that we'll remember for an eternity. This quote was something I'd written earlier. Yet, why couldn't I remember the doctor's confirmation of Sean's survival? Could I have forgotten? I returned to the present, still locked in a gaze with the being. Sean was no longer there. The sense of familiarity quickly faded, replaced by a surge of hatred. Glaring at the monster, my fists clenched. I charged at it, taking it to the ground. Before it could react, I let loose a barrage of punches. "You're the reason Elizabeth is gone. You're the reason Sean is gone. I'm gonna kill you," I growled, raining down more blows. It showed no resistance. It merely accepted my strikes. And again, and again, and again. I had no plans to stop. Blood flowed from the thing's face, staining my fists. With every strike, my body broke, and the light within me began to extinguish. Ignoring the growing pain, I continued, determined to kill the man who had taken what I held dearest. Tears clouded my vision, but I pounded my fists downward in a fit of rage, hoping to murder the figure. I felt a gentle tugging on my beige shirt, pausing my assault. A tiny hand gripped the fabric. My arms fell to my side, and I turned my head to see my boy standing beside me. My eyes widened as I witnessed his lips parting for the very first time.
"I forgive you, Papa,"
he said, smiling at me. We embraced, tears streaming from my eyes, and I soon felt a second pair of arms wrapping around me. A ring pressed against my skin. I held on for what felt like hours, but I knew I couldn't do so forever. Opening my eyes, I found myself alone with the figure in what was once Sean's room. I stood up and approached it once more. In one swift motion, I hugged the thing, pulling it close. When I let go, the figure vanished. It was over. I retrieved the picture frame from the closet and placed it back on my bedside. Sean and Liz stood beside each other with grins on their faces. In the reflection of the frame, I could see my own smiling face beside theirs. I smiled with them, one final time. I know Sean, Elizabeth, and the angels are looking down on me, wishing the best. They would want me to forgive myself. Though it won't be easy, I think I'll manage. They may not be with me on this earth, but they're with me in my heart and mind. Thank you all for listening to my account. I believe I'm going to be okay from this point forward. Don't expect any more updates from me. I feel it's time to move on. It was a pleasure talking to you all. Well, my friends, we've reached the end of tonight's chilling tale. My family experienced a deadly car crash by the talented Icy Dice. I hope you've enjoyed our descent into darkness and that you'll carry a piece of the Fear File Chronicles with you as you drift into uneasy dreams. If our story left you shivering and shaking, don't forget to like this video. Share it with others who crave a good scare, and subscribe to the Fear File Chronicles for more haunting horrors. Remember to hit the bell notification so you're always among the first to know when a new nightmare awaits. As always, we appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing your fears and frights with us truly means a lot, so don't be shy to engage with our sinister community. Until next time, remember to embrace the darkness, for it is within the shadows that our most terrifying stories are born. Good night, and stay scared.